Hello everyone, this is the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage, and continuing on my series of making videos to have discussions about some of the items, accessories, things that you often have with a vintage sewing machine. And a lot of people have questions about what it is. Sometimes you will get a machine and you will get a lot, and I do mean a lot of things, and sometimes you get nothing with it. And it's always great to have items, and as I've encouraged you folks in some of the other videos, I always mention that it's important not to throw anything away or give it away or say no to it unless you know what it is and whether you need it or not. And for years, I would come across items and I didn't really even know what I had. And so I held on to it until I finally figured it out. But right now, I'm going to talk to you guys today about sewing machine feet for vintage sewing machines. And I really would like to talk about shank. Many of you will hear the term shank, S-H-A-N-K, and it may or may not make sense to you as to what in the world it is. So when you talk about sewing feet, one of the reasons that people call them feet is that, of course, they press down above the feed dog area and they are on top of your fabric. Many of you may be aware of some or all of this information, so bear with me because we have a lot of people who are new to sewing or new to sewing machines and they may not even know any of these terms. So the foot, this particular foot I'll talk about in a minute, but it's a zigzag foot. But I wanted to talk to you, this area here where you see this little dip, this is where, of course, you will attach your set screw with the foot to attach it to the presser bar of your sewing machine. And the foot, of course, is the piece that is going to go flat on top of the fabric. The shank, and the shank is very important. It is this little place that connects the connector to the foot. And you can think of the shank as sort of the ankle. If this is the foot, this is the ankle of the foot right above it. And there are several types that we're going to talk about. Now, if I put all of these in a row, we'll see if you guys can sort of make out what you're looking at here. This first foot on the left is a low shank. And it's called low because it is the lowest. If you look at all of these feet here, when you look at them, you will notice that the lowest point where you could put a set screw is on this low shank foot. This is also one of the most common shank styles. It is the most common shank style for sewing machine feet. The next one is exclusive to Singer when we're talking about home and domestic machines, and it's called the Slant Shank. Now the Slant Shank, of course, you see this angle here. Now sometimes you'll see sewing machine feet that are others that have an angled shank, but that doesn't mean they're slant shank. And the way you know, of course, is you would take it and you would put it up onto one of the Singer Slant-O-Matic machines. Those are the Singer 301s, the Singer 400, 500, and even the 600 series. So, for example, so I've got you sort of a close-up view. This is the Singer 301 that I just got. I'm going to be doing a restoration soon at some point. And this is actually kind of a good place to notice. If you look, this of course is the flat plane of the sewing machine bed. But if you look at the needle, let me find something to point at it here. If you look at the needle, notice that the needle is moving from the side. You can really see this. It's about 10 degrees off of vertical. So if this was a vertical sewing machine needle, which virtually all of them are, notice that when you come about 10 degrees, that creates the slant shank and the slant needle position that Singer innovated. It was a feature that had come from industrial machines. So if you're not sure if you have a slant shank foot, there's one on here now, it's an edger foot. You attach it, and when you attach the slant shank foot to one of these Singers, when you put your presser foot down, the foot itself should be flat on top of your fabric, and then the shank will be at an angle, if that sort of helps. Now, so I've actually zoomed in on the last two of the sewing machine feet. Now, this one on my left is a high shank. This is most commonly seen on some of, not all, but some of the vintage Necchi machines. The Italian-made Necchis were known for high shank sewing machine feet. And you can see it if I put the little low shank next to it, you really see the difference. Now I'm comparing a straight stitch foot, the low shank version, with a binder foot over here. So don't let that throw you. What you really want to pay attention to are the set screw attachment area and the shank itself. And notice how much higher it is than the low shank. And then of course you have the slant shank is sort of somewhere in between. If that helps, let's see here. Looks like I'm playing with toys here. They are toys. I don't know if that's useful to you, but notice the spot where the set screw will go, and it's the height of that position that really determines it's why the shank matters to us when we're looking at sewing machines. Now lastly, I'm going to show you this foot. This foot is exclusive to some of the vintage Kenmore sewing machines. Now many of Kenmore's machines, the non-rotary machines, are low shank. However, when you see a lot of the 1900 series, the 158 1900s, like those wonderful Maruzen-made free arm machines that I often talk about from the 70s, late 60s and 70s, they have what's called a super high shank. And this was an attempt by Sears. Sears went to their supplier and said, hey, if Bernina can have special sewing feet, we would like to have a special foot that you can only, you have to have this foot in order to use our machine. I'll talk more in another video one day about how I believe certain Kenmores were an attempt to get a Bernina-like machine. Because Bernina feet are one of those feet that are unique to Berninas. They only fit Berninas, they don't fit any other machine, and it's part of the reason Bernina feet cost more, even in vintage, in the vintage category, than other foot types like you see here. The super high shank will generally run you more. They've become collectible just because there were fewer of them. Still, there are a lot more of these than there are Bernina feet. So that is sort of a quick rundown on the concept of shank, and it matters because if you don't have the right shank foot, let's zoom back out so you can see them all together, your foot's not going to fit your machine. Okay, so most of you are going to be focused on the low shank. Most of your machines will be low shank. If it's a slant shank, it's going to be a Singer, and only certain Singer models. Most of the Singer machines made outside of the Slant-O-Matic series, 300, 400, 500, and 600 series machines, the rest of Singer's sewing machines have low shank feet. So I don't want to make you think that Singer's only use slant shanks. Singer had a lot of sewing machine models. And the low shank, again, is the most common. So that's kind of a rundown on the shank, guys. I'm going to actually sort of wind this video up, and then I'll do another video on actual sewing machine feet and the types of feet and what they're used for. But just a quick little video to talk to you about the shank of sewing machine feet and why it matters. Thanks for watching, and if you have any comments or questions about the shank of a sewing foot, leave your comments below and feel free to subscribe to the channel. Thank you, folks.